women going into engineering and men going into home economics. That raised some pretty serious issues. Discrimination. Nobody expected them there. They were relatively few. Even some of the professors didn't want them there. As we said, we've got no way to ever tell how many women over the years were steered out of engineering. And we don't know how many men might have wanted to major in home economics, but were steered away. Maybe their family pressured them to do something that was more predictable. Maybe their friends made fun of them. Maybe their faculty or advisors discouraged them. Maybe administrators discouraged them. There's no way to really count that. Something that's interesting is women in engineering and men in home economics had parallel complaints. The handful of women who went into engineering early on looked around the engineering building and said, hey, there are no bathrooms for women. They expected all the students and faculty to be men. Why would they have bathrooms for women? And the male students who went over to take home economics classes, they looked around and said, hey, there are no bathrooms for men in these home economics buildings. They assumed they only needed bathrooms for women. So kind of a problem when you've got to go. For the female students in engineering and the male students in home economics, some of them unfortunately encountered professors who weren't really welcoming, professors who thought it was inappropriate to have women studying engineering and inappropriate to have men studying home economics. And actual discrimination in the 1930s, there was one male student at Kansas State University who went into home economics, declared a major, took all the classes, filled all the requirements, and then Kansas State said, no, we're not giving you a diploma. We know you met all the requirements, but we're just not giving a diploma in home economics to a man. They finally apologized and gave him his degree 40 years later. Okay, coming up to the end of the story here. What happened after World War II? Immediately after World War II, there was a backlash against women in engineering. When war was over, a lot of people wanted to go back to conservative gender roles. There was a real push to get women out of male jobs so the jobs could go to veterans who were looking for work. The GI Bill brought a lot of men to college in the years immediately after the war, and that meant that they literally didn't have room for women in a lot of classes. Even if women had wanted to go into engineering, sometimes they said, sorry, we've got too many male veterans here. We don't have room for you. There was still an assumption that engineering really was a masculine field. Take a look at this headline here. It says it all. The assumption women are not for engineering. The person who wrote that article in the 1950s, that was the dean of engineering at Penn State University. And he said flatly, women lack the basic capabilities for engineering, and no employer was going to want to hire a woman engineer now that the war is over. So there was a lot of discouragement. Nevertheless, over the decades, the number of women in engineering did continue to grow despite that discouragement. 1949, across the entire country, if you look at all colleges and universities, Iowa State, Purdue, Ohio State, California, everywhere else, total of 763 women enrolled in engineering. Think about it. 763 female engineering students in the entire country in 1949. That's less than we have just at Iowa State in any one year now. But then by 1957, less than a decade later, that had more than doubled. 1957, almost 1,800 women enrolled in engineering across the entire U.S. The trick is, during those same years, the number of men in engineering had also skyrocketed. So even though the number of women in engineering grew, they still made up less than 1% of the total engineering students in the 1950s. There's a story of gradual change that I don't have time to go through here, but in recent years, women have made up roughly 20% of enrollment in engineering in the United States. Similar transformation after World War II in home economics. The field that used to be known as home economics became renamed, sometimes human sciences, sometimes consumer sciences. It broadened to include a wider range of disciplines, including things like child psychology and consumer economics, that brought in more male faculty to teach them and brought in more male students to learn them. That was kind of a double-edged sword. Having more male faculty in the department formerly known as home economics gave it higher prestige. To put it bluntly, in the early 20th century, when the home economics department had female faculty and female department chairs and female deans, it was unusual. All the other departments at Iowa State and other colleges had mostly male faculty, mostly male chairs and deans. And so a woman's department looked strange, and sometimes their prestige was questioned. When they brought in more faculty who were men, more male students, they suddenly got more respect. But the double-edged sword, when you had more male faculty, suddenly that was fewer job openings for women faculty. When you've got more male department chairs in home economics, suddenly you've got fewer women. So a double-edged sword. Still, it's a big change. 2007, men made up almost a third of the students in family and consumer sciences at the University of Georgia. 2010, men made up 20% of the College of Human Sciences here at Iowa State. Even so, both fields remain among the most imbalanced to this day in American higher education. Today, women still earn only about 17, 18, 19% of bachelor's degrees in American engineering, and men earn only about 12, 13, 14% of bachelor's degrees in family and consumer and human sciences. The thing to know is there's nothing inevitable about this. If you look at other countries, they have significantly higher numbers of women in engineering in particular. Norway and Latvia, for example, women make up more than 50% of engineers. So there's nothing written in stone, nothing predetermined that it has to be this way. One last thing I'll mention before finishing. I don't have time to talk about it here, but there are other gender shifts that you can see in education. One of the ones that's really big here on the land-grant campus, you see a big gender shift in veterinary medicine over the centuries. Back when Iowa State opened in the 1860s, veterinary medicine mainly involved treating large farm animals. So the classes mostly enrolled men, and the assumption was men were the ones who had the physical strength to push around a horse, to push around a cow as you were giving it shots, as you were training it. But by the late 20th century, there were more jobs opening up in veterinary medicine for treating domestic animals, small pets. That really opened the door for more women to go into veterinary medicine, to the point where now veterinary medicine has a significant female presence. And some say it's no coincidence. The average pay in veterinary medicine also dropped as it became more feminized. So, okay, if you want to know a bit more about that, as mentioned, I teach a couple classes that talk about all this in a much wider context. I teach a course in American women's history, and I also teach a course just on the history of women in science, technology, and medicine. So I'll stop sharing my screen now, and depending on how much time you want to take, I'd love to have any questions from you about things you want to learn about that I didn't talk about, or anything you want more details on. So, Laura Jane, I'll let you tell me
if people have questions. No, you can, well, let's just let questions go until they are evaporated.
Yeah. So feel free to, I've got to stop. Wait, have I, no, hang on. I've got to, there we are.
You start screen sharing, yeah.
There we are. Okay, so you can either unmute yourself and ask questions, or you could put something in the chat. I see we've got some comments here from Laura.
I was just annotating throughout, so.
Yep, yep, yeah. Oh, that's cool. Weekly socials, yeah. Very supervised space. Yep, yep. So,
I can't remember, but I remember reading about it in the 70 years of home economics. So they had a book that they did in the 70s, 80s that was 70 years of home economics at Iowa State, and it
yeah.
covered that they would do that at Sunday nights or something like that.
Yep, yep. And the idea was that, you didn't want them to do anything scandalous on campus. You
No,
wanted to be able to tell their parents that they were behaving okay. And you certainly didn't want any unplanned pregnancies or anything. But at the same time, they were supposed to meet so they could ultimately
right,
get married and be good
right.
families.
Hey, Dr. Bix, I do have a question. So you were talking about women kind of being going through the education to be teachers. When did men kind of start to become teachers as well, just out of curiosity?
That's a really great question. Yeah. Well, I mean, K-12 teaching is still another one of those things that's really gender imbalanced, same with nursing, same with library work, same with social work. And there have been real efforts over the decades to get more men to go into K-12 teaching, real efforts to get more men to go into nursing. Because with nursing, there's the thing, some nursing jobs, sometimes it helps to have somebody physically strong to move around a patient. More than that, the idea that men should be able to be nurturers as well as women. With K-12, there was the idea that might be good for young boys to have a male teacher as a role model rather than just seeing women at the front of the classroom. But the problem really was twofold. Again, once these jobs became feminized, like library work and nursing and teaching, the pay was relatively low. And especially since men were expected to be breadwinners, not many men were that eager to take a pay cut and go into these stereotypically female fields. More
Mhm.
than that, there was the prestige. Once everybody thinks K-12 is a woman's job, once everybody thinks nursing is a woman's job, unfortunately, sometimes it takes a bit of bravery for a man to say, yeah, I want to go there, get skepticism from your parents, maybe get teasing from your friends. So there have been some fairly serious efforts, really, since the mid 20th century to get more men to go into these traditionally male fields. And, in many ways, they're great, but there's still a long way to go.
Mhm.
Great question.
Yeah, and I would second that. Like we're going to talk about men and FCS, but that I would second that. There's a really good hidden brain podcast called the Playing the Gender Card that there aren't necessarily as many overt barriers to men entering female dominated fields, but men can have the man card revoked at any time for a bunch of different reasons, and it's a lot more subtle.
Yeah. Yeah. So, any other questions that anybody wants to raise or put anything in the chat? One of the reasons why I love talking about this is I think it's cool that Iowa State plays such a key role in this history. I mean, our place being such a leader in developing home economics, our place being
Mhm.
such a leader in promoting women in engineering, our place being such a leader in these World War II programs. I don't know. I just think it's really kind of cool.
I'm
Oh,
kind
I think it's really cool. Like I again, yeah, when Danielle said like, well, yeah, you got somebody right there. Like I realized when we dig into it, the history of home economics and FCS is really tied to Iowa State. In the 1970s, when that book was created, we were literally called the Harvard of Home Economics. So it's kind of interesting of
Uh-huh.
how things have changed and evolved.
I can't wait to go
Yep,
and share this with the
absolutely.
students. So
Oh,
tomorrow.
fun. Yay. Well, I posted one of Dr. Bix's articles and I can show you guys how to search the library because I
Mhm.
know when I was a distance learner, like they didn't show me how to search library articles, but I find Dr. Bix's writing really um I want to say it's academic writing, but it's very palatable,
Mhm.
if that makes sense. Like you just have a very good narrative tone, whereas opposed to I don't know, I have a high threshold of like what is going to I like people to like learn through story and knowledge and things like that. So if you enjoy her articles, she's got other ones out there And are you finishing your book? Are you still working on your book?
I'm still working on a bunch of projects, but as you can see from the PowerPoint, I also really love visual. You know, history isn't
Ah,
just about documents, it's
right.
also about
Yeah.
advertising and photographs and drawings. So I really love visuals. They really bring a
Yeah.
history to life.
No, that's
So,
a really good
yeah.
point because you always do have them peppered with visuals. Like, yeah, it is hard to like just fit you in any box of like, this is how my research comes out.
Yeah. So if you don't have questions now, but if you
Yeah.
think of something, if anybody thinks of anything that you want to ask later, or if you're doing research or teaching or anything where I can be of any help, I've put my email in the chat. You can also find me just by, Googling or searching the Iowa State website. So feel free to email me at any time. I love hearing from people.
Thank you,
Thank
Dr. Vick, so
you.
much. Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you.
Thank
Have a really good
you.
night.
So take care and have a good evening.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
All
Bye.
right. Thanks, everyone. Okay, if people don't mind, I'd like to take a break until 7:15, and then we'll get our we're going to give you tonight's work session. I hope will be shorter.